Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another Product Growth Leaders topic of the week. Now, Steve, last week we talked about how do you get that first job as a people manager in product management. And this is the second part of a two-part series where we're going to talk about keys to success as a people manager in product management. What's your first thoughts on this?
Well, I think the biggest challenge in taking on a people manager role is to let go of the product management role. And we see this with executives and CEOs in particular. You know, it was my baby. I founded the company. And at some point, you're like, well, I have to stop managing that so I can manage the business instead of managing the product. And I think we talked last week about how suddenly the manager of people needs to be managing the people, not the product
Yeah.
anymore.
And that is a big shift, and we'll get to that in the poll a little more. We got a great panel. Joy McCaffrey, Jason Weber, Dominique Signorel, Glenn Pride, Calvin Marshall, Cory Bryan, and of course my partner, Steve Johnson. And what we did on Monday was put our first question in there. In product management, what are the keys to success as a new manager of people? And normally I've got Jason Vincent as my one of my first people to go to, but Jason Weber, longtime listener, first time caller. Actually, he's been participating in our product leaders in transition before. You came in pretty quick, and it was I would call it a pretty Joy answer. Listen, listen, listen. Talk to me about what you're thinking.
Well, you see too many people come into new roles, and the first thing they want to do is they want to put their stamp on it. They're like, I'm going to come in here and just shake everything up. Now, I personally hate when people say it's because we've always done it that way. I don't think that's a legitimate reason to do something. But as a new manager, if you're from the team, that's one thing. If you're coming in externally, you've got to understand why things are done the way they are. And some of the things may be very legitimate reasons to do what they're doing. And there's other things that you're going to run into that you're like, why are you running around in circles or banging your head on the wall over and over again? But you don't know that when you start.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been through that transition a couple of times actually in my career. And you really do. You need to take every single one of your people. You need to listen to them. You need to talk to them regularly. I always give all of my direct reports at a minimum every other week an hour of my time to talk about whatever's on their mind. It doesn't even have to be work related, but I learned so many fascinating things that help me in my role as a people leader, taking the time to listen.
I completely and totally agree. When I've done that as a leader, last executive job I took, I did that. I found my team opening up on things they didn't feel like they could share with other people because it's like this sort of a new start. Let me be honest about some of the things that we need to deal with when they're doing that type of stuff. Actually, the first answer I got was somebody who Jason knows well, Rick Morse, and he led with the word trust, and how you need to build that trust and make sure you're doing it as we do that type of stuff. Cory Bryan, for people managers specifically, since this is a different job than PM, as we discussed last week, you focus on relationships and conversations with the people you're managing. So you and Jason are on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, the relationship is part of the trust. You know, building trust, have relationships with people, the people you're managing, and the people that they talk to and that you talk to daily, and then the conversations. Making sure you have better conversations for understanding, for clarity, for coaching conversations, mentoring conversations, whatever you need to do. But the way that you engage in dialogue with people as a people leader is, I think, the most important thing.
I completely and totally agree. Our friend Paul Hatala, he said, first three things that come to mind are clarity, integrity, and opportunity. And, you know, a very nice way of putting it, nice and concise. We actually got a great list from Dominic. You talked about listening also, put your antennas turned on. You want to talk me through sort of your four key points?
Yeah, I mean, listening is key, as mentioned early on. I think that's a very important point. And to Jason's point is, I've seen that in the past too, as people come in a role and hey, this is how I did it, and this is how it's going to be working. And before even analyzing, is anything broken, right? So let's make sure not to fix something that is not broken.
Yep.
And in building trust and even credibility, my second point was learn what you're managing. So you're in a team. Yes, you will be managing people, but learn the product, learn the market, learn the customers, learn the portfolio, so that you understand what the team is going to be talking to you about at one point of time, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's just I put blah 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 here. My third point is, but smart goals, right? Set your team for success. I mean, that's how you want to make sure that you manage the people. And my fourth point was kind of hiring people managers is spending a lot of time on the soft skills, because hard skills can be learned, right? But it's very important to be attuned on the soft skills.
I completely and totally agree. I guess research shows people like lists. So yours stood out for me because it gave us a nice list of things to think about. But it sort of was comprehensive. It talked about, yes, the listening stuff, right? But also a few other people have talked about digging in on the product knowledge. You need to understand it, because if you're guiding and helping people, you need to have a knowledge of their products and that type of stuff. And as a product leader, I never wasn't sort of wearing a partial product management hat. I always was, thinking about strategy of the product and the market and that type of stuff. So I always sort of wanted to make sure, even if I didn't own it myself, I had a take on it. And the blah, blah, blah. We always have to do the blah, 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 the objectives and the goals and what we're doing there. So great job. Thank you for your insight, Dominic. Steve, did you have something you were going to say? Or are you just like blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I'll go with just blah, blah, blah. But it is interesting, this trust thing. And I think there's another aspect of that, which is now your job is to get the trust of your boss. While you're coming in and building trust with your people, guess what? You're not on their team anymore. You're on your boss's team. And that's a whole other aspect of this, I think. So I think that I'm reminded of my first job as a product manager. I went into the dev team and I said, how can I help? And I think that's probably the right answer for a leader of people as well. Instead of trying to do their work for them or micromanage them, make sure that they have the support they need to succeed.
Steve, I feel like you were reading the next two answers I had here I was going to share. One was from our friend Jason Vincelette, who just said one word: empathy. I think, Joy, a lot of people are channeling their inner Joy. Calvin started with one word and then wrote a whole paragraph: humility. But I think empathy and humility is a lot of what you were just talking about, Steve. So talk to me about humility and the operative word of new.
Well, I read the, what I usually do is read the other answers and see if there's anything that I can add, or if I, just put a heart up. And when I read the question, I thought, really focus on the word new. And I just thought of situations in the past in which someone gets promoted and they say, right, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to change. So the focus, my mindset was more on a new manager in the existing organization, where they know where all the bodies are buried. Yeah. But now they're being asked to do something different. And in that sense, and I thought about this, I've been in this situation, that it's like you've just gotten promoted. Yeah. So really your wingspan is a little bit wider. There's other areas of responsibility, and the focus really is on leading. Yep. And so that comes with a bit of, there has to come, or in my mind, comes with a little bit of humility, because while we were sitting shoulder to shoulder, maybe you really didn't know what I was doing. Now you are, leading, and you are working with, the VP or whomever. And so you have to have a better sense of what I'm doing, what I'm working on. And you may not have cared,
Before.
last week. Now you have to.
Yeah.
So
it actually gets me to, it makes me think about, and this is probably going to be my answer when we get to our lightning round, but right, one of the greatest jobs you can do as a people manager is provide air cover, right? Now you have to provide air cover. You have to be that person. And maybe in your situation, as you talked about, Calvin, being promoted from within, you actually would have a good idea of where air cover is needed. Okay,
yeah,
we're going to get rid of those Friday slide check-ins with the senior vice president who just wastes time with us making slides just for him feeling good about these check-ins, right? And clear plate off, whatever it may be. Jason Weber, you agreed with him, and it sparked another thought on the longer term aspect. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, well, I just wrote it today, so it's pretty clear. No, what Calvin reminded me, the be humble piece, it's easy once you become a people manager, especially if you haven't done it in your career, to let it go to your head. And every time somebody, and I've promoted people also, and the speech I give them when they start is never forget that you're no better than any of these other people. You just have a different job.
Yeah.
Because when you get into a leadership position, gifts come, privileges come, people defer to your, wisdom or decision making. And it's easy to get a big head about that. I mean, I can see how leaders, and it's not an excuse, get themselves into trouble by doing stupid stuff. Because this is all part of being humble. Never forget
hubris versus humility.
Exactly. But like I said, it's one of those things. There's a lot of temptations that come with leadership as well. And if you fall into that trap, you will become a bad leader. If you always remember that you're the same as everybody else, you're not a better human being, anything like that. You're not, you just have a different job that comes with some perks, but it also comes with expectations of, bigger decisions, longer working hours, that sort of a thing. It's a balance you have to maintain as you move through your career. So it's just Calvin's comment made me think of that because it's something that we were talking about new people in, but I felt it was important to share.
No, I think it's great. I love it. And the reality is we could drop product management off this question because it's really keys to success as a new manager of people. We tend to do it as a lens because of product management, but I think most of the things we've talked about would fit almost everybody. I guess, Dominic's digging in on the product and market and competition may be a little more product management specific than others, but overall, I think most of the things fit in. Joy, I'd love to get your take.
I agree with what's been said. One thing that I would add is, as a new manager of people, whether they're former people that you were working with or a new team, is team building. And when I say team building, I mean like building a team environment, not just growing the number of the team and making the team bigger.
Trust falls and happy hours.
Yes, all of those obstacles running, right?
Well, you are the team morale person. It wasn't it Joy's morale
metric?
Oh
yeah. Yes. Just working together and sharing what everybody is doing, and helping maybe blockers, just getting them working together cohesively.
Yeah, I love it. I completely and totally agree. And I'll bring it back. Maybe this is also going to be an answer for the lightning round, but understand that team morale is something that you can manage and you should be responsible for. Too often we've talked about learning, we've talked about trust, we've talked about, a whole bunch of things, but the team morale as a whole, that's something to be thinking about. Glenn Pride.
And I'll just say one other quick thing that I think a leader is important is shielding them from all the crap from above.
Yeah, that air cover stuff. Completely and totally agree. Glenn Pride, your take.
Wow, I mean, everybody really has covered what I would say. I would also.
So you're just going to give Calvin's heart, or are you going to add something?
I am going to put an and on that. Don't pressure me. I think one thing that is hard for a lot of people to be vulnerable in front of their teams and to admit, like, even when you made a mistake, and own it, and and ask, say, I know that this happened and we need to rectify it, but admitting mistakes, I think,
Well,
is something.
I think that goes well with humility and empathy and trust, right? But it seems like you must be reading some Brene Brown if you're bringing in vulnerability. So, some great things originally. Cory Bryan, I'm going to go off script here. You put a great question in here, which I'd love to keep this discussion as sort of as an evolution of the Monday question. Where do you draw the line between people manager and leading a product organization, or do you? And so, as a product leader, I always had some level of product strategy responsibility while also managing our portfolio or product line or whatever you want to do it. Uh, I've never been just a leader who just managed an organization, although I've seen that work and seen that happen. Uh, what's your take on that, Cory?
I Part of me says it depends on the size of the organization. If there's 3 people, then you're probably doing both. If there's 25 people, you're probably doing one more than the other. I think that's the real question, is at what level. If you're high enough in the organization, you're setting some sort of product strategy, some sort of product vision, and you're empowering, hopefully, the other people that work for you that you are managing to help achieve that. You're not down in the details, you're higher level strategy. But I guess it's from the top to the bottom. How many different spaces do you have to go to sit there? And that's where that line is where is it 50-50? Is it 75-80? Is it 99-1?
I'm thinking about the situation where I had the largest group. I had 3 directors, and each of them had 5 or so people working for them. We had about 20 people in the whole organization, and I was very much focused on the strategy and the vision, and not just air cover, but almost being an evangelist, driving our vision in the organization because we were trying to get change to happen. And I relied on my directors to be the people managers, to do more of that day-to-day stuff. But I had to manage them. It just was 3 people, and it was sort of that cascade type stuff. Dominic, you thought it was a good point and a good question. I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and at one point, you're looking at personal development. So you're running your business, right? As from a product management manager, right? But also at one point you want to develop individuals and get them on the right career path, and it's more managing people than leading your group towards a common strategy and whatnot. So I think that the people aspect, maybe that's where I would draw the line. It's growing people, it's which may have nothing to do with actually your portfolio, right?
Yep.
I don't know how to explain that, but
And I was just while listening to you, I was starting to think, right, what a VP of development or engineering has to do some level of strategy, right? They do some level of, but some of it's going to be organizational strategy, right? Okay, what skills do we have? What skills do we need? How do we fill those goals? So there's some level of strategy a head of product would be doing that's organizational strategy. And I don't know. This is an interesting question. Jason, you talked about them being intertwined in the chat.
Well, you can't have a successful product organization without having successful people. Now, the skills that it takes to do those 2 things are different. I mean, if you go from product manager to people leader, the product organization or product skills are probably already there. The people skills are things that you need to practice and learn and that sort of a thing. But successful people make successful organizations. The one thing I'd remind everybody to do is communicate. When I first became a general manager, I had no idea how often I would be repeating the same thing. And you can never over communicate your strategy. You can never over communicate things that are happening in the organization that impact your team. You just need to do it. And the other thing is, if kind of a funny corollary to that, no matter how many times you say it, there will be people that misunderstand it. So,
well, it's the old presentation methodology, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them, and to your point, keep telling them.
when I was in scouting, well, my son was in scouting, and I was one of the parent volunteer leaders. One of the other men that was a leader in the group was a pastor. And he told me he had the 5 rule. He says, with my congregation, I will communicate everything 5 times, either, through a sermon, through their newsletter, through the whatever. And he says, I guarantee that there will be people in my congregation who did not get the message or misunderstood it. But I feel that I've done my diligence if I've done it 5 times. And it's true. So people put their own shades on things. So
I like that. I like that a lot. Steve, what's your take on this? You're a pioneer in product management, a thought leader. You've been around this forever. What's your take on the leadership versus manager of people?
Well, it seems to me that in working with teams over, decades, is it seems to me that most VPs are so busy with their leadership team and product strategy that they have very little bandwidth for people management, which I think is quite a shame. It seems to me that as a VP, you should be saying, my product is my team. But that's what I see and saddens me, is that a lot of virtually all the VPs that I talk to are really the senior product manager and are not managing their people or grooming their people.
Steve, I wrote a blog article, but we've talked about it, how product management was what connects strategy to execution. And I'm now thinking it's like that director of product management, that place where it's the lever point with the team of multiple product managers, may be that exact middle point.
Of connecting strategy to execution.
Execution, yeah. But
agreed.
I could see that. And Dominic, yes, talent management is important. And so part of it's having that relationship with HR and talent management. We did a survey, and most product leaders don't have that relationship with HR when they're doing it and that type of stuff.
Well, one VP that you and I know well, I commented to him that, every VP should have a folder in his desk of potential candidates.
Or her.
His or her desk. Well, I was talking to a man in this story, but okay. But yes, every VP should have in his or her desk a folder of candidates that they're like, I've met this person, and I think they'd be a good addition to my team when I get a head count. And this person I was talking to said, where's this folder? As if, HR provided it or something. And I'm like, no. That's your continuous job, to be on the lookout for talent.
Yeah.
And he's like, but where's the folder? And I'm like, well, no, you have to get a folder and start putting notes in it. It's actual work on your part.
No, it is work. This is a great conversation. I want to, before we move to the poll,
and
Joy,
and just one more rant.
Okay.
I kind of feel like, hang on, let's do a full rant. It's those VPs who then go to HR and say, I need you to find me some of these purple squirrel candidates who are, these perfect candidates who will work for peanuts. And why don't they have a folder full of great candidates in their desk drawer, right? Why do we have to go to HR for that? And yes, there are some actual legal things there. I mean, you do have to make the job publicly available, but still, it seems like we're letting down our side if we haven't been continuously looking for new talent within and without the company.
And I'll add to that, back to that place where I had the large organization. When I got there, we couldn't get any internal candidates to apply for our open positions.
Wow.
12 months in, I was having 5 internal candidates apply for every position. And part of it was I didn't have a folder, but I was out meeting and talking with people and evangelizing the vision and getting people excited about what we were doing.
Absolutely.
I always tend to run the other product, not the big product, but the other one. And sometimes when you run the other one, it's everybody's excited about the big product. Well, you as a people manager should help people get excited about your product. And I'll take it back to Dominic's original post about knowing your product and your market, your customers and the competitors, because part of the passion comes from that understanding. I wanted to give Joy, Glenn, and Calvin an opportunity on this leadership manager. Joy, you raised your hand.
Thank you. Steve was talking about VPs, and I just wanted to share something that I learned for the first time last week. I was talking to our VP of HR, and she mentioned skip levels. And I'm like, oh, okay. What are skip levels? And she said, when you have one-on-ones with your boss's boss. And I said, never in my entire career have I had one-on-ones with my boss's boss. Now, granted, I have worked at a lot of small companies where I'm reporting to the CEO, so there is no skip level. But
the chairman could be of the board could be.
You're right. But even at larger companies, if I'm reporting to a director and then there's a VP, never. I never even heard that term before. And I just,
well, not to mention that your boss would say, never, ever talk to my boss.
Yeah.
I don't want him to figure out that you're the only person in the department who knows what they're doing.
Well, and I've been in that situation, but I hearing it from HR is good because that means that it seems like it's something that HR is pushing versus.
yes. That's why she brought it. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Awesome. Calvin, you've
Yeah, I
got your finger up.
I'm just shocked by that because I just remember like 20 years ago when I'd worked at a large transportation company in Memphis. I remember.
Boy, I wonder who that could be.
Right.
Having lunch, taking my, as a senior or senior analyst at the time, and going out for lunch with my managing director. Who my manager reported to my manager director, and even having lunch once with the VP who she reported to. Yeah. So I just find that kind of curious.
Were they doing that?
Go ahead.
Were they doing that as a skip level thing, or did it just happen that said, "Hey, we're going to lunch. You want to come"? Because there's something to the formal process of it.
I remember getting on the calendar of my managing director and asking her and saying, I want to take you out to lunch. And I paid for her lunch and we chatted about whatever we chatted about. She refused to get in my car, so she drove, but whatever.
I might refuse to get in your car too, Calvin, but I'd have to see the car first.
Yeah, if you saw what I was driving, back then in 1998 or so, you'd understand. But I mean, and also getting back to Steve's rant earlier, it's kind of when you're talking about the VP and not being able to manage, it's kind of like what we touched upon last week, in that there's people don't get trained in order to lead people, except for like being in the military. In corporate America, those programs of training people to learn how to manage and lead people have gone away. Mm-hmm. So, at least in my experience in the last few years, the managers, the leaders that I've worked for vary by department. Some are good, some are bad. It's kind of mixed. And what I always found interesting is whoever I would report to, people, or it actually didn't happen to me as much as it happened to some of my peers. Whoever they're managing to, maybe I'd have a great relationship, but the people that worked for him or her all hated her or him. Like he's just not a blah blah blah. And I'm like, I get along great with this person. Yeah. And I just wonder if it's their ability to relate to their own people. Whereas at that company that I mentioned earlier, all of my managers were among the best managers I've ever had because they had a program in place, and so they learned how to lead.
Yeah. So. And maybe that's part of the advice of, we should put programs in place to do that, right? And we should make it part of it. And we could probably spend a whole week talking about skip levels and building that right culture. I want to get back to the sort of leader versus manager, and just see if Glenn has any last words before we go to this. Leader versus manager, go to the poll.
I'm good. I think
All right.
I think all has
Then
been said.
let's go to the poll. What we asked, what is the hardest part of becoming a people manager in product management? And gaining trust of leadership, gaining the trust of your people, gaining the trust of your peers, shifting from managing a product to managing people, or other, it depends. And boy, this was a not close at all. I think either I wrote a really good poll or a really bad poll, because 75% of people said shifting from managing a product to managing a people. Steve, I know you voted for this. It also is what you started with. Talk.
Indeed.
Anything more you want to say about this?
No, but well, yes, of course. To agree, I want to just amplify something Calvin said, and that is when I went from 0 people to 12 people in 24 hours, and I went to HR and I said, is there any sort of management training program or tutorial or anything? And they looked at me befuddled. I'm a first-time people manager, and they went, well, I've heard really good things about the 1-minute manager. Maybe you could go try that. And I was just like, are there any rules? Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to molest anybody, but other than that, and she's like, no, I got nothing for you. So it was really trial by fire. And I find it shocking that companies don't have a people management training track of some kind. But then, as we've talked about in the past, most companies don't seem to have much professional development anymore. And I'm sure they used to.
Yeah. All right.
And so for me, that was a big shift. I mean, I was going from a product manager to head of marketing, and suddenly I have to start managing people. And one thing that was really kind of funny now that I think about it is I told them explicitly, I know you know your jobs better than I do. I will not micromanage you. And they were like, yay. And then 2 days later, 2 or 3 of them were asking me to micromanage them. Do you like this font better than that font? And I'm like, quit. Don't talk to me anymore. I don't care. You're the expert. You do what you think is right. And they were like, seriously? And I finally realized that they didn't believe me. They were so used to being micromanaged by bad managers that
Stockholm syndrome. They wanted it.
Yeah. And ultimately it turned out to be delightful for everybody, that I didn't have to second guess them, and they were delighted to not have me micromanaging.
Awesome. Amy Konigsneck, who's from one of our clients, says, when you're a people manager as well as the product manager with your own products, it's difficult to have the time bandwidth. And it reminded me, my biggest hurdle was the not managing other people's products, right? I would see balls falling and I would catch them, right? And I realized pretty quickly that as a people manager, I can't catch all the balls. I have to help them, teach them how to keep the balls going or to not drop them. And that was tough for me. Cory, you also voted for shifting from.
Yeah, for the same thing we've been talking about, is the mindset switch that I have to think about and I have to teach others is you're not doing the job anymore. You're helping others do the job. You're going from, I can map that story for you, to what do you need to do to be able to map the story, if that's what you want to do. If you want to do something else, that's fine. Here's how we do that. Here's how I can help you do that. Or here's the extent of my knowledge, and here's how we can get you some of the things you want to. The thing that I really wanted to focus in on is not just the people management, but the environment that you're in. Psychological safety, we've heard about that. You're now charged with setting the environment for the people to be successful. So think about not only coaching individuals, but how is the system that you're in conducive to them growing?
Oh, great. I love it. Dominic, did you vote?
Yes, I did, and same answer there. I mean, it's all about building this safe environment, but I think that the hardest thing is making sure that you don't become this mailman or postman, whatever. I'm sorry, but where you just take, consolidate, and regurgitate without adding any value, right? I mean, that's where you have to be very careful. And I've seen that in the past where you just take, the team's input, make it pretty, send it back, right? No value added, right? And that's the danger I see, and the hard thing not to do.
Yeah, completely and totally. Joy, how about yourself? Did you vote?
I did, and I voted for shifting from product to
All
people.
right. Is there anybody who on the call who voted for, well, I guess getting the trusted people I know, who put other, it depends. Anybody? All right. Well, why don't we use that chance to move to the first Friday question? What would be your advice to your manager on how they could be a better people manager? So let's sort of look at it and say, let's talk to somebody who we work for or have worked for. What would your advice be? Because sometimes we can see in that type of stuff. Jason, what would your advice be?
That's interesting. I'll have to pull a manager from my past because I right now report to 8 people, which is a little interesting.
Well, that could be the advice. Maybe you shouldn't have me report to 8 people.
Well, it's a weird situation at a startup, so different story. But the biggest advice I give to multiple past managers, and this goes back to my advice that I put on at the beginning, is listen. There are so many, don't micromanage me. But listen, just listen and understand before you go in and make all these changes. Why are we doing things the way we are? And listen to other parts of the organization. One of the things on the comments going on is and be open to feedback. That's part of the listening. I always tell anybody who I have the conversation with, whether they work with me or not, I'm the easiest person to give feedback to because I honestly enjoy it. I can't do a better job without somebody telling me that either I'm doing a good or a bad job. So I crave it. But yeah, listen.
All right. Love it. Dominic.
I'll go back to trust. I'm in a position where I have a job to do. So, Mr. Manager, please trust me to do my job properly.
Let me do my job.
Let me do my job. Right?
I completely and totally get it. Calvin.
Well, I won't talk about my current manager, but I think with a previous manager, there is that humility. Really smart person, but in product management, he just was out of his depth, and just really being open to the learning of other people, because other people just have knowledge and have experience as well. So
no, I completely agree. It's tough because we all start picking out somebody in the past who we're thinking of. For me, it was sort of the Dominic's. Let me do my job, right? They were had me spend too much time on reporting and not on actually doing the stuff. And it's like the more time you spend on reporting, it's tough. Anybody else want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on the reporting thing. I think the advice to my manager based on my past would be, tell me what kind of reporting you need. I tend to be, everybody leave me the hell alone and let me do my job because I'm smarter than you are in my head. But I do remember working for a guy whose boss was always saying, what's going on with this project? He didn't know. So he would come to me and I felt like he was micromanaging me, but he was just trying to cover his own back. Right. So telling me, having a communication about what kind of reporting would be necessary without it being onerous. How do I keep you informed?
Yeah. Awesome. Cory, you have something to say?
So yeah, the 2 things that I would say very specifically is write down, take a piece of paper, write 2 columns. First column, what type of people manager do you want to be? Give me a couple words. And then on the other column, the 3 things you're not going to do as a people manager. I'm not going to micromanage. I'm not going to interrupt people when they're talking. Something specific, just 3 things to stick in your head to go, I don't want to be, and this is looking more negative than aspirational, but I found I've had more bad bosses than good bosses. And I've taken from that everything that I don't want to do when I become a people manager.
You took me to another place that I should have gone earlier. I've heard about people writing sort of profiles. Here's how I listen. Here's how I learn. So one advice would be letting them know that, right? Here's how I communicate. Here's how I listen. Realize that if I do this, it's not a bad thing. It's just I think out loud sometimes, helping them get to know you better. So awesome. Any other thoughts on this question? Are you guys ready for the next one?
I was going to say I've had 2 managers in the past who were know-it-alls. They knew everything. They'd done everything. They'd researched everything. They'd already tried everything. There was not a situation to be had that they didn't already know about. And they communicated that to you. And the problem with that is then you never wanted to suggest anything or try anything new because they'd already done it and they already had the answer. And, my feedback would be, well, let me find out.
Yeah.
Maybe I will have a different experience, but even if I don't, it would just be kind of nice to let me, run on my own.
Yeah. I completely, totally agree. Calvin.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Glenn.
No, I was just saying, like, make sure that you know the person and what they do on your team. I had a manager who would always say, "Oh, this is Glenn Pride. He works on my team," and it felt like I was like owned rather than like, this is what he does on the team. This is his portion of responsibility. It was like, no, he just kind of works for me, and I found that very.
He's my page.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it. And then to have someone come up later and not know what I do even made it even worse. So,
Well, hopefully your manager knew what you did.
well, maybe. I don't know.
Calvin, did you have a comment before we move to the next question?
Yeah, and which is kind of the opposite of better. I've had a mix of bad managers and a mix of good managers, and I've just found that the ones that I felt were the best, especially when it comes to communication, are those that said, if a topic came up that they weren't sure about, you know what, I don't know that answer. Right? A boss say, you know what, I'm kind of out of my depth on this one. I don't know, and there's nothing wrong with that because for me, it's just like there's a human side, and there's not I think Joy mentioned know-it-all. That's not a know-it-all because there's a lot to know out there. No one can know it all, especially, when you're driving products.
Wait, I thought that Joy's former bosses knew it all.
That's what I heard her say. I believe that to be true. Yes.
Yeah. So did they. So, all right. Our next question, and we got a time to get, depending on how deep we get, and we've been getting pretty deep in our answers. We may have time for everybody. If not, we'll see what happens. Where do you see people managers and product management specifically make the biggest mistakes? Right? Where do we see it all the time? What are the most common mistakes you see product management leaders or managers of people make? And I'll start out with this one. I think it goes back to what we talked about. They micromanage. They become the product manager themselves. Even if really bad if they were when they got promoted, but even coming in, and it's sort of hard because you've been a product manager. That's what you do. And Dominic made the great point of one of the things we need to do is get to know the product in the market. And all of a sudden we start having our ideas, and maybe we tell Joy we know everything and we tell her what to do. But to me, that's where I've seen the biggest issue with that. Steve, are you nodding in agreement or?
I'm nodding in agreement. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I have nothing to add. Just
see, Steve, you say that, and then in like a couple minutes, you're going to say, well, let me back to what we were talking about.
Well, I do that indeed. But, it's just like our relationship with development and marketing. This is what we need. How you do it is up to you.
Yeah.
Right. We need
and
to
that's
be,
tough.
and it is tough. And as Joy said, you know, there are a lot of times it's like, I think I know how I want you to do this, but how do you learn if I tell you how to do it?
Yeah. Where's the value in that? Jason, I was about to go to you.
I not providing context. When people give requests, why do you need it? And there's not always time for that, but generally there is. I mean, if you get it in the middle of a big executive presentation, that's one thing, but outside of that, there's always going to be context. And this is like your user stories, you know,
Yeah.
so that I can. That's the exact same type of thing that when you give requests, there's a whole bunch of chat going on. And one of the things that I joked about was how many times have you had an executive give a request to a group that generates a whole lot of work and people put into it answering the question they think the executive was asking, but
Yeah.
not actually doing it, and then going and presenting it and just kind of, well, frankly, getting roasted for it. But you need to know why. And I think the micromanaging that you brought up at the beginning, or not giving up the previous role, is the biggest mistake. But you can't over communicate. You can't communicate clearly enough ever. And so adding that context really makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I love it. Dominic.
Yeah, I was just going to add communication. I mean, the lack of communication is detrimental.
Great. Cory, your thoughts?
I think your answer is correct. The first one, which is probably why you went first, so nobody would steal it from you. The second one I would say though is not learning how to coach people or how to be a coach. I think you get the manager title because you were good at product management. You stop doing the product management job, but you forget or you don't know how to, because you've never been taught how to help others. So coaching skills, practices, mentoring, those types of things would be areas where they don't think they need them and they ignore the skills that it requires to do that.
No, I love it. Joy.
Well, I think in particular to people management and product management is that the product is always changing. So it's not just managing people and doing the same thing over and over again, the one-on-ones, the performance reviews, and their job is always the same. It's the strategy, it's what's going on in the market, it's the competition. And so it's just a lot of things, you know, you have to know new tech stacks or a new product launch, or there's just always something new. So I think that's added to it. You're not just managing people, it's the business too that you need to understand.
And that's actually a great, I've seen so often somebody got in that director role and they stop being in touch with the market and learning and growing. And it's like their whole mindset and everything was based on when they got promoted 5 years ago, and they're not aware of all that change, or they're not listening to it. And I've seen that happen a lot. And especially it's terrible when they have access to, they're helping to drive the strategy. Yes, Cory, I'll let you say it.
Yeah, it goes. I was thinking further about what you said about micromanaging, but the notion that now I'm in charge and I get to say what goes, that ego trip that you get from now I'm in charge and I will tell you what to do. Don't do that.
Yeah. Glenn.
Where do people see? I mean, I think, unfortunately, it's an and onto Cory, you know, the ego and being humble and not assuming that just because you knew something 2 years ago that it's applicable and it's still valid. You got to keep that saw sharp.
Yeah.
You may even have to put some blades on the saw.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Calvin, any last thoughts before we move to our lightning round?
I can't really add anything significant than what has already been said.
Okay. I think it's interesting to see how similar, you know, I did not write these to be redundant, but it seems like we all got back to the same points, right? The keys to success are also the places where people had problems, so maybe it does get redundant. For our lightning round, simple. We've talked about a lot of stuff, but what's your advice to a new people manager? Obviously, we're thinking in the context of product management, but somebody's been promoted. They work for you. They don't work for you. You're a mentor. You're a coach. You're a friend. What's your advice to a new product manager? We've talked about a lot of the problems they have, a lot of the keys to success, and the hardest things. But what's your advice? And I'm going to start this one with Jason Weber. And Jason, we do these sort of as a short phrase or word. What's your advice?
Find a people manager that you admire and get them to be your mentor.
Find a mentor who you admire. I love that. Glenn, Pride.
Practice listening. You can practice it.
Practice listening, because it's actually something you can practice. That's great. Calvin.
Stick with me, kid. You'll go far.
So you're offering to be that mentor.
No, I mean, say, communicate with your team, listen to others. Don't think you have all the answers.
Whoa. You're now taking all the answers that Dominic, Cory, Joy, and Steve and I were going to give. So we'll give you communicate. So we got find someone to mentor you, practice listening, stick with Calvin, or communicate well. Dominic.
Build relationship
All right. Build the relationships.
all around people.
That's a good one.
I like that. Joy.
Well, I was going to say the one word communicate, but now I will say empathize.
Empathize. Boy, when we have these larger groups, it gets really hard for Steve and I. Cory.
Well, the obviously correct answer is call Calvin. Thank you, Calvin. The thing that I would say though is put yourself in a growth mindset, a learning and growth mindset.
Oh, a little Carol Dweck brought into this.
Just finished the book and I loved it.
It's a great book. I love it too. And that's actually totally going. I would not have gone there with this, but it's totally perfect. I love it. My partner, Steve.
Never date your employees.
Never?
It's a good rule. It's a good rule.
Are you speaking from
Boy, he got so practical
background?
here.
Context.
There's no context at all. It just seems like there are so many men in America who need to be told this thing, from the President Clinton to apparently every executive in America. Never date your employees.
Boy, this has gotten way off course of where I thought it was going. Jason with find a mentor, Glenn with practice listening, Calvin, stick with Calvin, Dom, build relationships, Joy, empathize, Cory, call Calvin, or read the growth mindset and take a growth mindset. Steve, never date your direct reports. And I'm going to go with, remember, your job is to make your team better and figure out how to do that. So I'm still trying to gather myself after some of those last answers, but I want to thank each of you guys for doing this. What a great conversation we had today. And we do this every week. On Monday, the question goes in the community. On Wednesday, we have the poll. And on Fridays, we have these wonderful conversations. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Every week I learn, every week I laugh. And this is some of the best times I have all year are on these calls. So thank you very much. We'll see you guys next week in the community. Thanks, everybody.